Oh shit. It's that time again. God, hair's sticking up all wrong. What have we done here? Good morning to everybody. God, it's 4:30 in the morning. What are we about to do? All right, there we go. We have liftoff. This machine has not been rebooted the entire time that we're doing this thing right here, which is kind of fucking wild to me. All right, what do we got here? Let me see. So then we got Jira or whatever. I just had none other than Joseph Eads come through on the Red Politics server, repeating the often debunked idea that I was the federal informant that got empty dubs thrown in the clink. As you guys all know, that's impossible because MTW had informed on himself so much more powerfully than I ever could have. Yeah, Chad, that guy is a creepy stalker who's been following around the other show for a long time. He was actually kicked out of our whole thing because he was sending rape threats to some of the women, which I don't really cotton to that. That's not a good way to be my friend. And he actually got utterly destroyed in a kind of picture finish there. So we do a radio show on Friday nights. And at one point, let me see, I was talking with this individual, a guy named Joseph Eads, who lives in Florida. And what did I say? In the channel, I said to him, we compromised MTW's box and we have all of his info. We know everything about him. We turned all of that info to the feds, hence his current predicament, right? So this is just me saying shit in a channel to fool with a guy who I know is an imbecile and who will parrot it endlessly, right? In actuality, I don't think it was necessary for anybody to turn over any information whatsoever to the federal authorities to catch MTW. They had a paper trail on him a mile long. And also, I think MT Dubs himself will confirm that at no point did anybody ever root his box or do anything like that. So what do we got here? Yeah, MTW is not exactly a low-key offender. So George Washington says, I'm getting paid 600 grand or 6,000 grand from Centerlink for having an intellectual disability. We'll be spending on an ounce of weed. Honestly, I'm with Chad. I would buy Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's going to be, by the end of 2020, it's going to be around 14,000. That's my guess. And honestly, like an ounce of weed will just make you more intellectually disabled. To my mind, the only sound investments in this world are Bitcoin and donating to independent authors. With that $6,000, I could just edit this book that you love so well. Or pay for, a professional editor to go in here and fix all this or whatever. So anyhow, the story of Eads is kind of a funny one. Because this guy would just flood that channel for months on end. He was really pretty annoying. He was doing stuff like trying to DDoS people, and he was definitely trying to get our personal info, reach out to like our family members, trying to get me fired and stuff like that. Just the standard internet miscreant stuff. And so some people who were associated with the show didn't much care for this, right? And they decided to do some digging of their own and find out what they could about one Joseph Eads. And suffice to say, his home network was not as secured as it might have been. And it turned out that there was some sort of an exploit on his cable router. So for those of you who don't like spend a lot of time on IRC, when kids who think they're hackers fight with each other and one of them owns the other one, they'll drop what's called a zine, which is just like a short magazine detailing their exploits. Typically at the front of it, they'll have some details like proving the directories that they had access to. They'll say the mean of the exploit and so forth. Well, in the case of Eads, because they had back-end access to his router, they were then able to sniff all the traffic coming in and out of his home, figure out all of his passwords, and they went through, and just to give you an idea of the sort of individual this was, they took over a bunch of his domains. One of them was like White Power Party or whatever. The guy's like some kind of fucking white supremacist, which is not relevant to why we hate him. Like that's not a good character marker. But really, it's just because he's a creepy old drunk who threatens to rape women that I'm not a fan of him in the first place. And he's super annoying and autistic. But so they took over his router. They got access to all of the computers that he had, all of the boxes that he had IRC shells and shit like that on, and they wiped everything, but not before exposing like his desktop, the like 540p MILF porn that he had downloaded, a picture of his penis, which was bent like a boomerang, and small and unsatisfactory, which he had sent to some woman over Facebook. They took down his Facebook accounts. They took down every single account associated with him. And to my eyes, the cream of the crop was that they used the information that they had gleaned to transfer his cell phone number from like, he was like on Boost Mobile or some shit to T-Mobile, then from T-Mobile to Verizon. It turns out that if you steal someone's number and transfer it between two different cell phone companies, they'll never get it back because you can never get those two companies to see eye to eye. The number is just gone. They won't even try if you try to do it. So this man lost like all the data on all of his computers. They bricked his router at the end of it so that he had to get a new one there. All of his personal info was dumped out to everybody. And then on top of that, he lost his fucking own cell phone number. So all this went down after this individual was like creepy for a period of years with us. And so his recourse has been to call me like an FBI snitch in like every format that he can for like years and years and years. And I'll tell you like straight up, like if somebody is sending me death threats or something like that, I'll absolutely go to the FBI with it. I've done it a few times before. The FBI is the agency that deals with that kind of shit. In terms of like keeping tabs on chatters and informing them, yeah, if the price was right, but honestly, so far the FBI didn't offer me anything to get rid of Weave or MTW or whatever, because in general, these chatters do a good enough job of broadcasting their own data that they don't need an informant to fucking zap these guys. But in general, I will tell you, like unequivocally, I've never had to talk with the FBI where I didn't have to initiate the conversation and say, hey, this motherfucker is sending death threats. Can you like ask his mom to have him stop? And then those people stop for the most part because they're getting into like a creepy kind of harassment where you can start getting orders of protection. They start getting like misdemeanor convictions and so forth. All right, what do we got here? So Chad thinks that it's going to pump to 1 million in a single day. Vote for Yang Gang will solve the incel problems since $1,000 UBI isn't happening. So UBI money gets into prostitution. Hell yeah. So we got cool users. Oh, hello to Rurikster, who's totally new. Yeah, so anyhow, that guy follows me around from time to time. He messaged me last night saying some creepy shit, and I just really don't care. You know what I mean? I've just faced so many more worthy adversaries online over time. I just don't give a shit about this dude. And I urge everybody to like make up their own mind whether or not I'm a federal informant. But please keep in mind that in my channel, like I'm constantly like, hey, don't do anything illegal, don't do anything stupid, and so forth. That channel has been monitored by state level agencies since like 2015. And we've never made a secret of that. Just because of some of the people that we had coming through there, you should expect that the things that you say online are monitored by the authorities. And especially when you're on a network like EFNet, which is fundamentally insecure. Yeah, like they're not, operators can see everything that you fucking type on an IRCD. So they don't need to go to yours truly there for information. They can just get it from the likes of operators like Oz, who has a desperate fentanyl problem and would easily sell people out right there. So anyhow, the other part of it is just generally most IRC users I like, and I want to have them around. I would like never fucking tattletale to the authorities on them because like I want to have these fucking people around. So the only people who would ever have to worry about me are my direct enemies. All right, so works for U.S. Army for 1 year. I was never in the U.S. Army, by the way. Get free of charge FBI, ATF, ICE to bust ass of live stream competitor and wannabe death threat idiots. I've never really cashed in on like the whole time in the military. I qualify officially as a veteran, but yeah, I was only there for like a fucking year, and then I got thrown the hell out. I got an honorable discharge as a medical because they're like, oh, this guy's a little too crazy to do our military shit. So yeah, it looks like Yang didn't make his 15% in the Iowa caucuses last night. It's a shocker, but it's a fucking shame. I like that David Chappelle tried to help him out and everything. I think Yang would be a solid VP pick for somebody, just because he's well liked, hasn't gone negative. So Stratum says that MTW is the MTI informant who turned in MTW, hence why his sentencing never happened and why his sentence is unknown. There's some weird shit happening there, right? Really weird shit going on. He must have claimed he was going to give up a bigger fish, and I bet it's not the great burrito caper that he's trying to give away. But yeah, it would be kind of funny if he was in some kind of crazy Moscow show trial, Kafkaesque inform on himself type situation. I would love that. But all right, what do we got here? So hopefully this is not the first time that I've had to answer these claims that I'm an FBI informant. It probably won't be the last. I will tell you, like, if the price is right at some point, I will absolutely sell out anybody who is not a personal friend of mine. But I really define personal friend very loosely. If you give me even $1 per show on my Patreon, then you will never be in danger of that. So I encourage everybody on the internet to give me $1 per show so that I'm never your enemy. That's pretty easy. Well, let's get down to the story. I believe that it's all sex scenes for the next 200 pages. So strap the fuck in. Yesterday we worked on this long chapter where they were getting really deep into this idea of that the earth was essentially doomed, and the best recourse for young people was to get into the hard sciences. This is, what do we have here? Twister, Hero 94, says we're on chapter 79 right here, entitled The Deal is Sealed. And just like trigger warning for anybody who doesn't like really explicit sex scenes, there are really explicit sex scenes in either this chapter or the next one. So they're saying, is 94 the year you were born or your IQ? Don't be mean to these randos from Twitch. They didn't sign on for our normal level of acerbic wit. All right, so let me see what the comment here. So general notes are add a lot of the arrogance of youth, the lack of perspective, thinking the two of them are the most important thing of the world. Add uncertainty by removing things Freya shouldn't know, tension, dread, and uncertainty. Nice. Okay, cool. He says sick for him, bro. Oh, that's so mean. God, imagine being born in 1994. God, how old was I even then? God, what was I fucking doing in I think 1994. I was like had my own room, and I was going to, God, what grade was I even? That's probably before I even went to high school. And I had like a gang of friends, and we had a death metal band together, and I thought I was like the singer, and I had real long hair. And I was into like Warhammer, and I had like a lot of plasticine clay, and I would make like all these little spaceships and army figures and stage like these gigantic wars in between the two of them. Yeah, like that was what I was all about in 1994. I think fucking at that time, like big on MTV, were probably like a lot of NWA type stuff, like Ice Cube and Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre had some shit going out. What year? November 23rd, 1993. So that came out November 23rd, and we were all banging that album. That was fucking amazing. So if he came out in 1994, he was into the Game Boy Color. Yeah, I'm like, if you are wondering how old I am, I was too old to get into Pokemon. Like when it came out, I was like, this is kid shit. You know what I mean? So Game Boy Color was in like 1998. So you would have been 4 years old rocking a Game Boy Color. I could see that. I remember when like the original Game Boys came out, and we were just playing Tetris like there was no fucking tomorrow. And like we had before that came out, were like those Tiger LCD things. My favorite one was Simon's Quest, mostly because of the sounds that it would fucking make, and you would just burn through tons of AA batteries playing these guys. And I did defeat Dracula on there, but maybe not on the hard mode, because fucking Simon's Quest on or Castlevania for Tiger was difficult as fuck. My first experience to Nintendo was playing an arcade game at a Piggly Wiggly that was off of one of the big boulevards by our house, and they had a machine where you could play Super Mario Brothers on it. It's fucking wild. But yeah, and I just remember being like so compelled, so drawn into like that video game world, just loving like the way that it abstracted things down into, you know, you're a plumber that needs to jump on blocks and everything. It seemed like a crazy adventure. And at the time, I was just going to the library all the time and getting these big stacks of books and reading like tons of science fiction and choose your own adventure books. I used to love this series about this Mormon kid named the Great Brain or whatever there. It was all about the fucking hijinks and scams that this prodigy child would run. Mm. So in 1999, I had it for Christmas with Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow. Damn, son. Well, now that we've gotten neck deep in nostalgia, so one of the notes that we have as we're editing this scene is that we're trying to add some more of that lack of perspective and arrogance of youth. I think if we level one criticism at the writing thus far, we would it would be that we're writing these children too much as adults. They know things that children should not know. They're not as arrogant as children would be. They're not as foolish and emotional as children would be. And that's something that may have to be in Pass 2, because we've done most of what we can in Pass 1 here. So yeah, I was reading a little bit about this. So apparently for the Iowa caucuses, they were trying to use this application written by a company named Shadow that fucked up the reports. So Pete Buttigieg, who also managed to get like another poll thrown out that didn't, like they claimed that the Buttigieg campaign wasn't mentioned in this relatively large poll. So apparently that app fucked up and they couldn't get their reports done, whatever. And Buttigieg was releasing information claiming that he, from their internal numbers, he thought that they had won the caucus, which obviously is not the case with the new reporting that's coming in at the moment. But so they apparently he was using for his campaign a version of this Shadow software that everybody was putting together. And they, as I looked at it, about $40,000 had been transferred from his campaign to this company, Shadow. $40,000 is not enough money to bribe somebody above board to take over an election. So right now, it's all kind of like in the realm of shadowy conspiracy and so forth. It's going to come out over the next few days, but there's a paper trail for all the Iowa caucus shit. So it's not like anybody can steal it, as far as I know. It seems like Sanders will win handily. What I was seeing earlier was that Warren had a showing of like 20% or something like that. Sanders was like at 30%, which is pretty wild for Warren right there. She's not going to get that support in any state where black people exist. Because that just everybody I know in New York City, and I was seeing like an advertisement. There's a free newspaper called Gay City, and it was about the different Democratic gay clubs that were and like clubs, not like nightclubs, but political clubs. And like one of them endorsed Sanders, and the rest were all for Warren. Which is, and that actually tracks with my my friends who are gay in New York. Most of them are boosting Warren and not too hep to Sanders. So I don't know what Warren's appeal is to the gay community, but what do we have here? Yeah, so that's their first N64. I hope Sanders gets drug-induced psychosis and shits in his mouth in the White House. That would be kind of wild. I will say that I've been telling people this for a while. When you're voting for Sanders, be sure that you're essentially voting for his vice president because he's too old to serve a full term. Um, so Brad Barron says, I don't comprehend anyone's affinity to Warren. I can understand falling for the Warren meme, but Warren has no redeeming qualities that I can see. So I just listened to a Michael Moore podcast the other day. So first I watched Michael Moore giving like this tear felt political speech or whatever, where this guy, he's like a kind of bloated windbag, and he was up there on stage like practically sobbing and very emotional, and like it was call to arms for Sanders, and it was really like a little bit sad to watch. Like I'm all for people being passionate and but he just seemed sloppy and out of control, like he had taken some kind of, like he was drunk or had otherwise. But anyhow, up in my, because I watched like one thing about Michael Moore, his podcast popped up in my newsfeed, and this is like a much more compelling version of his argument where he's not emotional or whatever. And he did like an hour long sort of takedown of, oh, people are saying to start editing. All right, well, yeah, we'll get off to the politics in a second. He did like an hour long takedown of Warren talking about all the places where she had been dishonest. And they're really, really, it's a really damning thing. And like Michael Moore has done videos with both Sanders and Warren. He's supported Bernie for a lot longer, but really like her like a very cynical, a woman couldn't win the presidency gambit left a bad taste in my mouth. Like I could tell right away that they were lying and exploiting it for political gain. And she's just lied about so many other things. Really, she has like a huge credibility problem. And I think that would destroy her utterly in a national campaign. I couldn't in good conscience vote for her. So many streamers avoid the talk about politics. Yeah, well, it's going on. I'm interested. My own political take doesn't have a lot to do with either party. But in America, this is like a pretty big deal. Up until November, this is going to be a massive thing for all of us. And it's something that all of my friends care about. And, science fiction is inherently political when it really comes down to it. When we're imagining what the world could be, we have a lot to say about what it is. So I really think that some of the most interesting stuff in science fiction is what it says about current systems and ways that we could be different. And if we look at the chapter back here, you can see that I'm absolutely on board with catastrophic climate change. I've always believed that we're going to see significant sea level rises. It's something that even as like a very small child, I used to live in like a beach house by the ocean, and every year we could see like the ocean moving up and eating like a little bit more of the dunes, and just this idea. And I would have dreams all the time about just a giant storm, like coming through the windows of the second floor and carrying us away and everything. And as I've gotten older, like obviously that's the information that I select for, and like find interesting. So the science in the last chapter about all the methane bound up under the Antarctic and in the permafrost and so forth, it's all real. So the best Godzilla movie, Shin Godzilla, focuses heavily on politicians figuring out a response, and it's exactly the aspect that I always wanted to see. Yeah, I love the idea of us trying to fight against these forces and figuring out what to do in the face of like an unreasonable and unstoppable onslaught. And let me see. Got any mods? I need to sleep more often. Keep the sperm count up, not the word count. I actually took some Benadryl last night and slept from like 7 a.m. to 4 a.m. this morning, which is like a solid chunk of sleep. I'm pretty happy about it. Like 9 hours or whatever. All right. So now that all that politics and whatnot is zipping around in our heads, I think we should read a poem. Evening Harmony by Charles Baudelaire, from The Flowers of Evil. Evening Harmony. Now comes the time when, swaying on its stem, each flower offers incense to the night. Phrases and fragrances circle in the dark, languorous waltz that casts a lingering spell. Each flower offers incense to the night. The violin trembles like a heart betrayed. Languorous waltz that casts a lingering spell. A mournful altar ornaments the sky. The violin trembles like a heart betrayed, a tender heart unnerved by nothingness. A mournful altar ornaments the sky. The sun has smothered in its clotting blood. A tender heart unnerved by nothingness hoards every fragment of the radiant past. The sun has smothered in its clotting blood. In me, your image, like a monstrance, glows. I do not know what a monstrance is. Let's find out. Mods is in chat, moderators. Nah, I tend to keep it pretty. I really don't care about moderating. I'm pretty free speech when all is said and done. If somebody's spamming nonstop or whatever, I'll go over there and fucking ban people or just mute them on the whatever. In the other chat, we have to have moderators because there's so many more people. But here, if this guy wants to spam whatever Nazi shit or whatever, he'll get tired of it eventually. I don't think anybody is really on his side. What is a monstrance? That's what I'm going to know. An open or transparent receptacle in which the consecrated host is exposed for veneration. Look at this guy. That's so fucking cool. Here, let's go to Wikipedia. A traditional solar monstrance. The priest blesses the people with Eucharist displayed in the monstrance. Huh. Usually elaborate in design, and most are carried by the priest. Wild. Oh, that's cool. I would have never known the name for that thing here. Let me see. There we go. Oh, speaking of which, I need to remind me to take some NAD. I got a new bottle of that, so I need to take some of that before this is all over. All right. Well, now that we've done 20 minutes of preamble, I think we should get to editing. So what we would like to do is get through 17 pages today, and then we would be back at our 10 pages a day count, which I always talk about trying to strive for. So if you've never seen this story before, this is a story of a young woman who discovers an alien probe in a downed meteorite, and she finds that she is beginning to share thoughts with her love interest, Dan Gregulus, telepathically. And around page 600, everything is starting to get real. And the fucking authorities are investigating. She has run off to a hotel in Vermont to shack up with her boyfriend. And shack we shall. So, chapter 79, the deal is sealed. They were suffering together, sitting on the sofa in front of the gas fireplace in their room. Dan was better at hiding it, but Freya had grown expert at reading him. Okay, so how do we feel about this line? They were suffering together, sitting on the sofa in front of the gas fireplace. Dan was better at hiding it, but Freya had grown expert at reading him. She could recognize the churning in his depths from the ripples on his surface. She saw the slightest... Oh, yeah, see? I think we can just cut this. Yep, that's better. What do we got? Uptime. I don't know what uptime is. I think Restream.io hides most normal chatbots. So whatever that's on there. Shout outs to whoever is viewing on Picarto too. I always like when we get like people on like some of the rarer streaming platforms. That's always kind of interesting to me. Means how long you streamed today. Oh, cool. How long have we been there? I want to say like about 27 minutes. That's my guess. I can't read from here at all. Yeah. Let's see. She could see the slightest shadow on his smile when she was slow to reach a conclusion he was moving towards. The helpless twinge where he was struggling for a way to say something, and she was not there to fill in the gaps with him. Dan was better at hiding it, but Freya had grown expert at reading him. She could see the slightest shadow on his smile when she was slow to reach a conclusion he was moving towards. The helpless twinge where he was struggling for a way to say something, and Freya was not there to fill in the gaps for him. When their eyes met, there was a camaraderie of dissatisfaction. They were twisting in the same frustrated need. They were addicted. Freya and Dan were addicted to each other, and this was withdrawal. Everything felt like too much effort. They drifted through dinner, barely tasting the food, and during the meal, their conversation died a slow death before either of them could say what they really wanted to. Yeah, that should be a new sentence. Oh, I have a pair of pants on top of my. See, there's a headphone cord right here. There's a pair of jeans thrown on top of it, and so I have an untoward tension in my hearing. During the meal, their conversation died a slow death before either of them could say what they really wanted to. Freya glanced around the room. Freya glanced around the hotel room. The ghosts of their passion were still twisting in the sheets, dripping on the bathroom floor, but those people were gone now. I don't know why I often, like, Dan was searching her with his eyes. That always seems out of place to me. I think I've removed that for about like 10 different spots. Dan was searching her. Mm. Dan kept glancing over at Freya. It had been her idea to spend another night, which meant it was her responsibility to fix this somehow. But everything felt frayed and slightly unreal. She had become a wraith, powerless to touch the physical realm. She tightened her grip on the arm of the couch, half expecting her fingers to She tightened her grip on the arm of the couch, half expecting her fingers to simply pass through it. That's crazy, Freya recognized, but everything about this was insane. Praying some magic ball would help let her hear her boyfriend's thoughts, pretending she was in love when they were just empty words someone else had said, hiding away in Vermont and acting like she never had to go home. Maybe they should forget about staying the night and just... She wondered if they should forget about staying the night and just drive back. The hotel would charge her, but it didn't matter. She reached into her pocket for the star ball, and Dan's eyes followed her hand. It was cool to the touch, expending no effort. What if it was out of power? What if it had died? The other dies too, Freya remembered. Ask it to fix us, Dan said. half joke and half desperation. Freya pulled the star ball out of her pocket and held it out in her palm. He set his hand over hers. Positive thoughts, she said, and together they willed the Unity to start. But the engine would not turn, and after a few moments she returned the orb to her pocket, feeling dumb for trying it. Worth a shot, Dan shrugged, and she began to laugh without him. They were both so stupid. An hour ago, Dan had held his head up. Earlier that day, Dan had held his head up like he meant to save the world single-handedly. Now the face that peered at her with confusion seemed more boy than man, unsure and miserable. She saw a flicker of anger in his eyes and wished she would go through with it. She wanted him to hit her as hard as she could. So this is a weird line. All right, so as we put this line into the book, so baby making at its finest. Oh yeah, this is a line where we gonna get in trouble. I can already fucking feel it right there. Just her desire for like to have somebody violent with her, if only to feel something, is I think something that hold on, what do we got here? I'm seeing messages coming from people. Oh, somebody talking about weird shit. Oh, cool. Thank you for banning Eads. He'll be back. Just make another account, Chad. But yeah, worthwhile to get rid of that guy, IMO. I don't waste more time. So anyhow, yeah, like right away, I can tell you that it is a big no-no to talk about people who wish to have domestic violence visited on them. But I will tell you that I have been in arguments with people where I'd be like, I wish they would just like fucking pop me and get it over with. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's fair to have somebody who is like deep in this pit of despair wish that somebody would just strike them. So I feel like that's something that we have justified throughout the book, and we can not get away with, but I can include it and feel good about it. As she chased the errant thought, Freya was suddenly laid out in the dirt behind that Grayson cafeteria. She could feel the brilliant flash of light behind her light, yeah. As she chased the errant thought, Freya was suddenly laid out in the dirt behind the Grayson cafeteria. She could feel the brilliant flash of light behind her eye, the throbbing in her skull, the cold smell of rain falling all around her. With a sudden, terrible clarity, she'd realized she'd wanted that too. She'd been an insufferable cunt to everyone until someone finally snapped because she wanted to be hurt. Wanted somebody to destroy her because she couldn't do it herself. Someone was wrenching her off the ground to drag her to the principal's office, and the rain pouring down her face had grown warm. The vision broke apart. She was weeping on the couch. Dan had his arms tightly wrapped around her. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh no. Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. That was scary for a second there. I went to hit delete. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She kept sobbing into his shoulder, but it wasn't enough. When her voice had trailed away to nothing, she felt him moving. He was pulling out his phone. What are you doing? This is getting really heavy. I'd like to call Dr. Garbuglio. Is that okay? Don't, Freya said, and her voice was too sharp. Dan drew back from her. Was she threatening to call the psychiatrist because she wouldn't fuck him? She shut her eyes and shook her head, not at him, but at herself, feeling awful. Don't, Freya said, and her voice was too sharp. Dan drew back from her. Was he threatening to call her psychiatrist because she wouldn't fuck him? She shut her eyes and shook her head, not at him, but at herself for thinking that. It was such an awful, unworthy thing to think, and she would have to answer for it when the Unity returned. If it ever did. I'm sorry, Dan. I'm just broken. You deserve better. Hey, he said quietly. He took her by the shoulders and caught her eyes while she was trying to look away. Everything is okay. You're not broken. You're recovering. Believe me, you're a lot stronger than I was. Not... Freya began, but Dan shook his head slightly, stopping her protest. Dan had never lied to her. He wouldn't say it if he didn't mean it. She was trying so hard to believe him when he reached out and set his palm at the center of her chest over her heart, and her breath caught. He took her hand and put it at the same place on his chest. She could feel his heart beating through his shirt. Deep breaths, he said, and she followed along with him. She held each for so long she began to feel dizzy, but it was working. She stared into his eyes, and her thoughts were at last stilled. Freya, I know you. I love you. I am you, Dan said, and the words hung between them for a long time. She didn't want to disturb the sound of them. Even if it doesn't come back? Freya finally asked. From the way he took it, she was sure he had the same fear. Yes, he said. She shut her eyes and nodded. She needed to believe that. Freya moved towards Dan and kissed him. The lightest touch she could. He kissed her back just as delicately. There was no pressure. He drifted back from her, slowly enough that she didn't feel like he was pulling away. Ooh. Wait, hold on. Sodom and Gomorrah Masala. Oh, cool. Why, they have a town called Zoar? That's dope. I want to go there. Yeah, there's not enough biblical wrath happening nowadays. But I digress. All right, what do we have here? We can just try to sleep. We don't have to do anything else, Dan offered. All at once, the weight on her was gone. She didn't realize until he... Freya hadn't realized how worried and obligated she'd felt until he said it. You're so good, she whispered in his ear, feeling him smiling against her cheek. Oh, that's kind of cute. That's like a cute little note. She just like whispering in his ear, and she can feel like that thing happening. That's a neat note. I don't know if you could actually feel that in real life. I don't think that's ever happened to me there. So let's take a gander at this chapter. So chapter 79 is really kind of really like a little bit dark there. I'm worried about what's going on with these characters. So that's there. Let me just see how I feel about this chapter. So I think a lot of this is fair for these characters to feel. I like her realization that she was somewhat provoking these people into being bullied. Like that there was a self-destructive aspect of her behavior right there. So I think that's kind of like an interesting thread to tumble down. How in like a lot of people who are bullied, you get this idea that people are being bullied for like no reason. People just pick on them because they're weak and so forth. But I spend a lot of time on IRC. I see like constant bullying. I participate in the bullying. Some people try to bully me. I bully them back and so forth. There, there's like a lot of scrabbling on there, and I will tell you that nearly always it is on the person who is getting bullied. They have to perpetuate the cycle, right? Like eventually, people really will lose interest in somebody where they're just not getting anything back from them there. Um, Now, that to say, like when you come to children, like most of them don't know how to break out of that cycle. They're not strong enough to stop it on their own, and like a lot of these are just opportunistic victims and so forth. But another part of it is like it's generally not somebody that everybody likes getting their ass kicked or whatever. It's usually somebody that you can get away with because they don't have the right number of friends to defend them or whatever they're. Um, so I like this aspect where she recognizes some of her own agency there, and a lot of that is like exaggerated agency too, because in the reality of the situation, while she's kind of like cunty to everybody at her school, um, like really she's not responsible for the attack that she suffers. Really, she is just trying to get away from those people, and is just lost in her own head. But partly here is her trying to address herself with like more power than she actually has in the situation, which I think is often the case for people at looking back at things. Um, they will tend to dream that they have more power and more agency in a situation that they actually have, and that fuels their guilt. And one of the interesting things in this story is the way that tied into guilt is a kind of vanity and like self-importance. Like when somebody blames themselves for a death of the other, what they're also saying is like a note of vanity where I'm powerful enough that I should have been able to stop this. And in a lot of cases, it's like kind of like an interesting reflex where they're confronted by their lack of power, right? Because you very much don't want this person in your life to die. You don't want this terrible thing to happen. You feel I should have been able to stop this somehow, but you couldn't, because in when all is said and done, we're finite. None of us are the author of the story that's taken place. Most of us aren't even bit parts in it. Most of us are not even named characters in the story that's taking place. And the author, if indeed there were an author, which I doubt, this is more of like a thousand monkeys on typewriters type situation. I think the author is George R. R. Martin, willing to dispense with as many characters as is necessary. So damn. So the entire scene takes place on the couch. So Stratum is saying, where were they? They're still sitting in front of the fireplace there, and I think mhm. Mm. Oh yeah, it's hard. It's hard to fit in that they're still on the couch. So we established the couch earlier there. Oh yeah, that's the actual George Washington, not a schizophrenic man. slowly losing all touch with reality. No, I'm just kidding. He's actually schizophrenic. Just putting it out there. But welcome, Jay Miller. Huh, name's familiar. I think we've seen Jay Miller before. If not, welcome to the stream. Okay, so yeah, oh, dream sequence. All right, so what's our note here? Rewrite this section. Continual movement of the star ball trying to grab them. Oh, I don't like seeing rewrite this section and whatever. Okay. So you want me to join their rabbit hole? I don't know. You keep linking that server to me, and it makes me not want to join it. You know what I mean? Like I just. So the rabbit hole is like an offshoot of individuals from I think the real MK Ultra server there. Yeah, just I don't know. I need a compelling reason to join a new server. Like literally, if you look at my Discord thing, I think I can pay attention to maybe like 5 or 6 Discord servers total, and everything else is no. Like the more that you link it to me, the less chance there is that I'll actually join there. I don't like being badgered. I can copy paste you the story. Well, that's interesting. I'd like to see it. So Alex Jones sells fluoride-free toothpaste. In the same shop, he sells Apocalypse Prepper gear. So yeah, I'm a big believer in fluoride, as in it like actually works on your teeth. Like that shit does prevent cavities, and I have not. It's like a weird boogeyman for these guys to have. I don't think that it changes up anything. It's just like, you know, I'm not an expert or whatever, but definitely, if you can look at the incidence of cavities after fluoridation, and I don't have a lot of sugar in my diet either. I do not want to like fuck around with cavities. I'm all for fluoride. Fluoride it up, baby. Give me extra. All right, so this is a dream sequence, and we know that I want to rewrite this one. So we're going to come into this with an open mind. And yeah, of course I want his money, though. Yeah, absolutely. I should be his like New York correspondent. Freya dreamed of the river, and Dan dreamed of the sea, night after night. The dreams had reoccurred so often they'd become intrinsic. However far they drifted, they knew they would return to their secret place, this familiar scene where every aspect rippled with déjà vu. It was as inevitable as samsara, but tonight was different. So samsara is the cycle of reincarnation. And in fact, I'm not pronouncing it correctly because I don't know what you do when you have an M on a samsara.
Samsara.
Samsara. All right. So samsara. So Jay Miller says, I'm not in it for the money. I just like paranormal radio. I'm a big fucking fan of paranormal radio also. Maybe I should get back into like running my paranormal detective agency in New York City. That was like some fun, weird shit from time to time. And Deja Vu is actually needs some accents. It's like 5 different accents on there. Yeah, so the E and the A are both accented. One left, one right. So you can remember it's like building a pyramid. Like, what is this fucking... I don't know. Like this pyramid here. E, A, J. So, yeah, let's try and... I'm going to have the right accents for my deja vu, because they would have to get added in later in the manuscript anyway. Deja vu, I've just been to this place again, higher in the street. All right, you know what I'm talking about. However far they drifted, However far they drifted, the dreamers knew they would return to their secret place. The familiar scene where every aspect rippled with deja vu. It was as inevitable as samsara, but tonight was different. Freya stood with her back to the river, listening to the warbling that fanned around her head like dark curls of hair. No, that fucking doesn't work at all. Hmm. Freya stood with her back to the river, listening to the water warbling across the stones. Uh, the black whispers of the river surrounded her, and above the sky, the black whispers of the river surrounded her, and above the sky was aflame with stars. She could hear them, a million rumbling, crackling furnaces, singing in a vast stellar sonnets. Meteors strike past, zinging like pop strings as they burst into nothingness. Shooting stars. Is Chad here? He was there for a second. Yeah. Are you two in like some kind of chat battle over the Discord or whatever? All right, hold on. I got an important message that I got to check here. So the important message was from somebody in the JRE Discord who says show feet or GTFO. I'm never going to show my feet on stream. Like I literally used to hitchhike cross country. My feet are like a rune of callus and cracks and yeah, just and they're fucking scaly and everything like that. I will never win cutest feet. So I've chosen not to play the game. You know what I'm saying? No, I just walk a lot. And like actually my girl was telling me I should just go get a fucking pedicure, which I would do if I could like I don't want to just blunder into like some spot full of Asian ladies. But I don't think that you can go to a pedicure for men spot without getting your dick sucked. And I would like to not cheat on my girlfriend if I can help it. Even though like there's some controversy as to whether getting your dick sucked while you get a pedicure is actually cheating on your girlfriend. But I feel like I'm going to err on the side of caution here. So yeah, that's something I'll probably have to do at some point in my life. Because good God, like yeah, during the winter, I'm like a horned lizard or something down there. Fun fact, we saw feet on the stream unintentionally in an overhead view. I doubt it. And if that's the case, that's long since been archived where nobody can find it. Shooting stars, burning up in flames when they hit the souls of mischief's atmosphere, chasing fame. Shooting stars. It was time. Her heels hung off the edge of the stone and she crossed her arms over her breasts, prepared for the fall. Always she would let go and the river would close over her with the roar of an audience. Somewhere in the depths she would hear his voice. She would tremble and fret. Somewhere in the depths she would hear Randall's voice. She would tumble and thrash as she looked for it and waked up, straining her ears in the darkness. But there was something in the way. She felt Dan standing behind her, bracing her with his shoulders. Elated, Freya wheeled around and she was dazzled by unexpected light. The sand beneath her feet was golden wheat. The water was a perilous green-black, and the storm clouds wheeling around them were a deep bruised black swirled with indigo. It took a moment to realize that this was his ocean, his dream. Dan dreamed in color. Freya was standing on his beach. Her eyes were drawn out to sea. He was swimming for the shore with all of his strength, but with every stroke the current carried him farther out. "Dan!" she cried out, and her voice boomed from the storm clouds overhead like thunder. So in previous dreams, when she's tried to speak, she's had no voice, right? Jay Miller introduced Chad to LRH. Oh, fucking wild there. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've actually enjoyed like the AMAs that we did on the MK Ultra Discord. I don't know. It's an interesting group of people, and they're constantly posting weird takes that I find interesting. So yeah, there's some wild folks in there. Some of the shit they believe is probably not true, but I'm still happy to hear it. You know what I mean? Dan was so startled he slipped under the water. Freya could feel everything shifting. Movement beyond the veil threatened to break the dream. She stilled her mind, willing it to hold together as Dan was tossed in swells as tall as buildings. He could feel her now, and his elation sang in her, but she could feel it was mired in despair. Ooh, that's not a good line. Mm. They were aware of each other now. They were aware of each other now, and she felt Dan weighted with despair. He could not reach her. Night after night, he never made it to the shore. She stepped towards the surf, ready to swim out and join him, but he was projecting alarm. The sea would drown them both. "This is a dream," Freya beamed, trying to get through his rising panic. "Let go." It was hard for Dan to let go. He'd done this so many times. It was hard for Dan to release himself. He'd done this so many times. Mm, uh, what's something that's stronger than a habit? It was hard for Dan to release himself from the compulsion to enact the dream. He'd done this so many times. Slowly he began to relax, and as he did, his sea could no longer move him. Freya's river was rising around him. The current carried him to the shore. In his eyes, Freya could see herself, radiant as a lighthouse. Dan climbed onto the shore and embraced her, just as a torrent of black water was racing across the sand and running over their feet. I found you, they thought together. Their joy was pure. They were just a single perfect note, ringing between two bodies in the estuary of souls. Neither dared move or think. They wanted to prolong the magic forever. But it was impossible to remain still in a dream. The great wheel was turning, and the shadows were hungry for equilibrium. Even as they tried to hold on, they were drifting apart. The storm overhead was gaining strength. Massive thunderheads were wheeling around the Massive thunderheads were circling around the hole at the top of the dream. They were within the eye, but there was no calm. A tempest of dissonance was roaring between. All right, that's the point where it gets like we're shoveling too deep here. Yeah, we can just get rid of the tempest of dissonance, and this will track a little bit better. Being within a dream magnified the unity of being within a dream magnified the difficulty of unity exponentially. The rifts in their perception that had seemed so significant when they were awake were vast chasms here, and there was no anchor, nothing objective they could use to reconcile. They could not even agree on what they were. In Freya's colorless dreams, her body was ill-defined and mutable. She was an apparition that could blow apart in the wind or wash away in the rain. But Dan's idea of her was exact and persistent. She found herself being cast into form by the strength of his conviction, and she recoiled from it. That can't be me. The Freya that Dan created was too glorious, too beautiful, too complete. It was someone she could never be. Yet even as she tried to deny it, she could not escape what he'd made her. This is you, Dan radiated, and she was in pandemonium, terrified of how much control she'd lost, resentful that she had to be this person he'd devised. He was seeing himself through her, and she was awash with guilt. She had no sharp lines or rich colors for him. She saw Dan as motion. Thrusts of deep strength, sharp jabs of intellect, lapping waves of gentle serenity. It was only when she felt him regarding himself with amazement that she understood what she'd done. Am I made of music? She billed Dan from the way he made her feel, and this was the purest language for it. She felt so inferior, but now she was seeing that beneath those sawtooth waves, glinting with razor lines of white, there was nothing beneath them. Dan's ocean was only a skin over silence. The river ran deeper and darker. The swirling currents of her river were washing away his beach, threatening to drag them under. Where they combined, there was tumult. Fresh water met salt. Alarmed. Thrusts of strength. Oh yeah, we're out there. Alarmed, Freya tried to restrain herself. She could feel her. Afraid, Freya tried to restrain herself. She could feel the pang of her alarm resonating in Dan, amplifying into fear. We shouldn't be here. It was the same aversion she'd felt when they were parked in front of the church. She'd wondered about it then, and she could see the roots of it. Now she could see the roots of it. Base urges, coiled things that ran deeper than thought, pieces of self that were meant to be expressed only here and then swiftly forgotten. Things Dan never wanted to show anyone. He was trying to shove the thought down, but her interest. Dan was trying to shove the thought down, but her interest was stronger, wrenching it out of him. They were serpents in the mantle, molten titans that could rise up and swallow them both. At once she was thrilled, electrified by his vision. Serpents of throbbing lust, Rigo pulsing in his hand, the quicksilver jolt of cum touching his skin. Wow, holy shit. Serpents of throbbing lust, Rigo pulsing in his hand, the quicksilver jolt of cum touching his skin. Jacking off in the shower, thinking about her, with his thumb slipped up his ass, burning with shame afterward. Jagged spirals of self-destruction, the urge to just slam down on the gas pedal of the Toyota and annihilate himself in a clench of shearing metal and snap. God damn. All right. This is a intense fucking paragraph. Thumb is the last finger I'd use. Yeah, and also like having your thumb up your ass is like a whole different thing. Trying to. Yeah, I think that's fair. See, where was Spaethiwa when we needed, or where was Stratum when we needed like perspective on the 12-page blowjob scene? It's a weird angle. Normal fingers are better. The caucus cocked us. I think the caucus is gonna be fine. We just gotta wait a day. Because they fucking use some like unproved third-party application, which is fucking ingenious there. Throbbing lust, Rigo pulsing in his hand, the quicksilver jolt of cum touching his skin. Jacking off in the shower, thinking about her, with his fingers slipped up his ass, burning with shame afterward. Jagged spirals of self-destruction, the urge to just slam down on the gas pedal of the Toyota and it. The urge to just slam down on the gas pedal and annihilate himself in a clench of shearing metal and snapping bone. Pits of unworthiness, pools of seething rage on the verge of erupting. All the things the hollow ocean concealed were laid bare. This was the real Dan. Freya could feel his... So that's a paragraph that an editor is like, well, I think structurally. So this is not a sentence, right? These are just lists of things right here. And in my experience, whenever you have like a paragraph that's just a bunch of lists like this, an editor will be like, well, you probably need some other words in there, like making it into an actual sentence. Whew. All the things the hollow ocean concealed were laid bare. This was the real Dan. Whew. Getting kind of deep into it. So yeah, like I like the like sort of weird metaphysical bent that this thing has taken here, where the two are confronting each other in the surface of their dreams. Jira says, "What the fuck, dude?" Uh, Utterly exposed, Dan was trying to turn away, but she was all around him. She felt him trying to disappear. All right, so that needs to be another sentence. Freya felt him trying to disappear, his edges coming apart with a soft fluttering of dark wings. She was inside of him, a cold and ringing intrusion. It was impossible to be so close without being pierced. She'd gone too deep. She'd gone so deep, and she was afraid it was too far, that there was no turning back. That's not me. Dan surrounded himself in a wall of useless denial. It was everything he reviled. She'd seen everything he reviled, everything he wanted to hide from himself. So one thing is just, I don't think we can go deep enough on the things that he's like guilty about right there. I do like, yeah, I think that's as far as you can go. You should probably have some like deeper guilt about his relationship with his mother and his dead sister, but I guess this would kind of track with the idea that his dreams are only surface level, because these are all very like outside of the like self-destructive slamming on the gas pedal. They're all pretty surface level things. Uh, I want that, Freya thrummed, and she was alit with it, on fire with arousal. Again and again she could feel the movement beyond the dream, warmth spreading at the edges of the sky and sensation quivering beneath the earth. She could reel it. The bone, uh, bones of the world. Oh God. All right. The bones of the world were rising up. Dan was responding to her desire with his own. She could move towards that. Let's check that out. Freya could move towards that. She could break the dream. But there was a note dancing at the back of her mind, a whispering voice that she wanted and feared. She remembered the cool surface of the starball. There might never be another chance. She trembled at the edge of doing it. It was just as hard as jumping into the river. Shedding all artifice as if she were pulling a dress over her head, Freya disrobed completely. The gaping wound of her grief, the inflamed edge of her resentment at Lassa, the sneering, supercilious suspicion that she was smarter than most. Belied by the ringing inferiority she felt around her friends. Her despair was unfolding, petal after petal, like a Mandelbrot rose that had no end. She was the pit at the top of the dream, the singularity that sucked in everything and gave back nothing. What do we have here? Oh, so apparently in the myth, Freya has two cats, Beigel and Trejul. Trejugel. I am not Freya. I am Shiva. I will destroy you. Oh, so Stratum says, he who makes no secret of himself shocks. So much reason you have to fear nakedness. Aye, if you were gods, you might then be ashamed of clothing. Her thoughts stilled the sea, and clouds broke apart, and everything was silent. She had emptied herself. Now they knew. When Dan did not reply, she spiraled inward in self-abandon. He would leave her, and he would be right to. For all the hidden fire burning within him, she was the real monster. Freya turned from Dan as he had turned from her. The dream was gone. It was all over. She was in the hotel room with the shadows from the fireplace dancing against the wall. But when she sobbed, she heard it through his ears. Freya. Dan's voice was soft. She could feel his lips against her ear. His arms were around her, and he was pulling her closer when he ought to be throwing on his clothes and headed for the door. I want you, he whispered. His words were shining in the certainty of the unity. He'd seen the very core of her, and he hadn't turned away. She could feel his desire. He wanted to be drawn into her oblivion as much as she wanted to smolder in his fire. She dared to believe it, and a rush of euphoria swallowed them both. All right, that's... They had been chosen. A dreamlike sense of unreality lingered, darting fear that this could be taken away from them. They knew unity was not forever, but they pushed the thought away. Thinking of the end was like contemplating death. Freya wanted something concrete to hold on to, and she felt it. They'd gone to bed in their underwear, and she could feel Dan throbbing against her through the fabric. Ooh. Ah. What a transition. Well, that's why we had our note to rewrite this shit here. Fucking awful. I think we should probably break from the dream scene to get into it. So, dream scene. And then that's not me. The acceptance of their deepest selves. And that's probably where a chapter break should be. How many pages does this go on for? So many. All right. So that's getting to page 617 there. So, all right. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. We have 8 pages of fucking to get through. I feel like it should be broken there. All right. Let me take a couple minutes, stand up and walk around, and I'm going to take some NAD. Maybe use Pulse. We use Pulse so often. I said... let me see. I think that a chapter break needs to happen there. And then we should transition into a new scene, utterly. And how long is this chapter right here? So the deal is sealed begins on page 603. And the dream continues until... Yeah. So 612, which is about right. All right, so actually we need a new chapter break here. And I think we should rewrite the sex scene from the position of a new chapter break. So the deal is sealed And then we'll get to chapter 80 on page 612. And then we can consider whether we want to. But yeah, I think. Before we do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, cool. So we can have 5 pages there. And I think that's good because we need to kind of refactor after that dream sequence and sort some of this shit out because it's too much. Yeah, I don't like this whole dreamlike sense of unreality and whatever. I think we're going to do a fair amount of trimming right here. Okay, but before we do that, back to chapter 80. I'm going to step away for a second and take some pills. Let me see. So Rico is a secondary character who Dan is ashamed of having had a very modest homosexual encounter with. I think the two of them jacked each other off one night while they were high, and he feels very conflicted and ashamed of it. But it is what it is, and it ain't what it ain't. Like Dan is like definitely veering on that old Kinsey scale a little bit. Mm-hmm. Don't pity voice me, you fucking moronic flutter, and then I just devoiced him immediately. Mm-hmm. I want that guy out of there. Yeah, like we don't need Effie in our chat. Uh, I don't know why he keeps getting voice at all. We'll have to work on that. All right, let's get down to it. Wow, are we just gonna like have a whole chapter that's just like fucking? Yeah, I don't know about this chapter right here. I'm like very uncertain about the power of our dream. Although like there are definitely notes within here that I really like. So So we've got like four or five. There are probably like about 10 chapters out of the 100 where we've put in like this note: final needs additional revision right here. And mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good God. Yeah, apologies in advance to everybody who does not want to edit through. I should just put a trigger warning at the top of this thing because I think this goes on for like 7 or 8 pages. We got to get through it. Not until we're united, Freya had thought, and they were united now. They'd gone to bed in their underwear, and she could feel Dan through his boxers. He was hard. Hmm. I don't like wriggle in that contest. Mm-hmm. That's she. Mm. Mm-hmm. This may be the hardest chapter to work on stream. Yeah, because we were in that like super like weird metaphysical blending of dreams thing, and who is this guy? Oh, some weirdo. Mm-hmm. Wait, just one encounter? Yeah, but it. I think that's probably the most formative encounter with him. Yeah, like yeah, not like they had a relationship or anything like that. I think he did it once and was like, I don't feel good about myself, and is carrying like a bunch of shame about that. Mm-hmm. Let's have a little action there. Uh, Not until we're united, Freya had thought, and they were united now. They'd gone to bed in their underwear, and she could feel Dan pressed against her through his boxers. Freya shifted against him, shuddering at the way he felt until she couldn't stand it any longer. She twisted around in bed, throwing off the covers and climbing on top of Dan. Through his eyes, she looked dark and terrible in the flickering light of the fireplace. The echoes of her voice rang in him. I will destroy you. Mm. Joe Mueller was reading the back scroll from like 2 hours ago about extortion. I think he was talking about me sort of soft extorting people to join my Patreon, so I wouldn't inform on them. But yeah, like he was talking about something completely different there, Jay Miller. Freya, the thought stung. Freya leaned over and turned on the bedside lamp. They both winced at the light, but she needed him to see her. Not you. Never, she pleaded. She desperately needed him to believe the lie, to pretend with her. Dan was willing. Together they harnessed their minds, allowing only positive thoughts like they were willing his car to start. Mm-hmm. All right, Dan was willing. Together they harnessed their minds, allowing only positive thoughts. Freya shut her eyes and saw through his alone. She watched herself pull off her t-shirt, feeling him throb as his eyes ran up her stomach and over her breasts. Along the line of her neck, it almost felt like a caress. Sensing the thought, Dan followed the same line with his fingertips, agonizingly slow. Freya leaned her head back. Let's see. Mm-hmm. Okay. Sensing her thought, Dan followed the same line with his fingertips, agonizingly slow. Freya retreated from the Unconsciously, Freya pulled back from the intense feeling, and as she drew away, Dan could feel her hair brushing against her back. The sensation made his fingers tremble. All right, so we probably used tremble like about 8 times too many in this. Opening her eyes, Freya smiled and lowered herself so that she was pressing against Dan through their underwear. She was already wet, and he was roiling in that feeling. Well, let's do rolling. He was rolling in the feeling, squirming on the bed beneath her. A twist of worry ran through him. He was so close already. Freya chased along that thread, savoring it, and when he was just a moment away, she lifted herself off him. She hooked her index fingers under the band of his boxers and pulled them off, running her eyes over every inch of his body with adoration. She wanted it all, the tight muscles at his neck, the ridges of muscle on his abdomen, the curls of his pubic hair, the straining erection, the cords of his thighs. He was so right. So that sound, chords of his thighs is awful. Uh, Thick slabs. Yeah, he was so right. As Dan became more and more aroused, his thoughts were becoming more direct, animal pulses of want. Chicken Twitch says, "What are we doing here?" You know, I often wonder the same exact thing myself. What the fuck am I doing here? So this is a novel that we're editing. We're on page 614 of 802. We've been doing this for the last 62 days straight. This is my eighth novel. It's called Gravid, and it's the story of a young woman who has telepathy, essentially. It's a little bit more involved than that, but we're writing. I think this is the first time that the main character and her love interest are sleeping together, and they are in a telepathic bond. Ooh. Whew. And I'm aware that this is slightly unbearable, but it's a good book. Don't let this weird sex scene turn you away, or do. I don't really fucking know. But yeah, like for whatever reason, we've decided to edit this entire thing on stream, creepy sex scenes and all. And that's where we're at. That's what we're doing here. Oh. They were pulling Freya forward. Dan drew a deep breath through his nose, smelling her arousal, and she could feel heat radiating from under his jaw in response. Let's take that out. What do we have here? I'm one of the mods from MK Ultra, now Red Politics. I discovered LRH over a year ago and introduced Chad, MK Ultra, an OG conspiracy debate server. Um, uh, MK Ultra, the OG conspiracy theory debate server, founded November 8th, 2018 by Chatty Daddy, split off into several conspiracy theory debate servers now as of the past month, combining into one. The priority is to maintain the user base. We've adopted MK Ultra's rules and are still friends with Chad. We've gotten rid of the retards. Chad's going through what I interpret as acute paranoia, and we're all actually still friends with him despite his distrust of us. We're not out to steal Chad's Alex Jones. We just want Chad to unban the carefully curated base we've taken upon ourselves to refine and maintain slightly differently from how Chad might have envisioned PP4L. Yeah, I mean, like, what do I think about that there? Yeah, generally I'm distrustful of any splinter group. Almost never do they work out there. More often than not. So there are good splinter groups, right? Which are created out of outcasts from a particular group where the group is fundamentally unsound. Like I would cite on in FNet lore the breakaway of Teens for Christ away from Pound Old Wares, which was basically like the malcontents banded together and formed something like amazing and beautiful. But in general, like the vast majority of times, when somebody tries to like break away a group from a larger whole, they lose the magic, and that group just dwindles away to nothing. Let me see. I invited the first members to MK Ultra. I was there from the beginning. Yeah, well, now instead of like one powerful server, you have like two servers that are both less powerful than the other one. My username is Bushi Bunton. Ask anyone. Yeah, I just like immediately. So as an outsider, right? I don't have like a vested interest. I don't chat like every day there. Well, I chat every day there, but like I'm not deeply involved in it. As an outsider to the thing, I see this kind of inter or intra fucking server Discord where people are fighting with each other, and I'm like immediately turned off. Like I don't want any part of it. In my mind, I'm like, let me just wait a couple months and see how this turns out, you know, because I don't want to inject myself into that drama. Um, if it's not something where I'm like already deeply invested with the personalities of a server and so forth, as like a kind of casual user, I would say that's just like a real turnoff. I don't want any part of it, and I find it's best to when people are like urging you to take a side or join up with their new thing or whatever. Usually, my response is just like fuck it, you know. Let's just wait a few months and see how this turns out, which is exactly what I'm going to do there. Nazis in Antarctica are real. So Spathywa says MK Ultra is an MLM scam. They do not pay you unless you're friends with them. I have a ruby downline with multiple diamonds in my downline. They owe me over $250,000. I have moved to essential oils now. God bless. See, Spathywa cutting right through the bullshit right there. Thank you. Um, let me see. Dan drew a deep breath through his nose. He could. I could smell her arousal. It made his hair stand on end. She could feel a serpent writhing in him, a hot insistence that he could just pull her down against the bed and take her. Freya melted towards the thought, but he did not act. He was too afraid of it. This time she would lead. With Dan's eyes locked on her, Freya slipped out of her underwear, and the sight of her naked ran through him like an electric shock. She could feel that he would do anything she wanted him to, and she reveled in that power. And she reveled in the power. Let's see, instead of could feel. She knew he would do anything she wanted him to, and she reveled in the power. She could feel a base desire. Let me see. She thought about straddling his face and riding until she'd nearly smothered him, white gasping stars exploding behind his eyes. The thought surged in him so hard she nearly made him come. She watched it. The thought surged in Dan so hard it nearly made him come. Freya watched his penis twitch. A clear breed, or ugh, I don't want like that to be oozing. Let's just cut that. God. Freya watched his penis twitch. He wanted that very badly, but it was something for later. For now, she needed him. Naked now, Freya climbed back on top of Dan and kissed him, her tongue dancing against his, her breast pressed against his chest. Hmm. Ooh. Ugh. It's uh, like physically painful awkwardness here going through this. Oh. Dan's hips were elevating towards her on pure instinct. He wanted her so badly. He was afraid he'd come the moment she touched him. She was afraid it was hurt, and they were orbiting the idea. Dan was afraid, but he was also worried. Dan was so afraid he'd come the moment she touched him. Freya was afraid it would hurt. They were both orbiting the idea and gravity of want. And desire was slowly pulling them in. Freya moved as slowly as her muscles could stand, giving Dan time to hold back. She brought herself lower until she could feel the heat from him, and she had to shut her eyes, rising away from him when his lip. Yeah. Jesus. No, he's naked at this point too, because she already. So as slowly as her muscles could stand, Freya lowered herself, giving Dan time to hold back. She brought herself close enough to feel his heat and shut her eyes, basking in the feeling. She teased him there until at last she pressed her lips against him in a gentle kiss that set his eyes rolling back. So what's the Freya slipped herself back and forth against Dan, and flares of electric blue light arced behind their eyes. Uh, duh, 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 duh. God. This is so hokey. We're going to have to take out that superlative in a second. Mm. Mm-hmm. These are the things that we do on the altar of trying to make an artistic statement. It's uh, it's so painful doing this right now. Oh, do we really have to get this specific? Hmm. I don't want to. Freya slid down and he pierced her, Together they felt the tear. They shut their eyes against the pain. It hurt more than they had expected. Dan began to soften from concern, and she clenched back against him. Huh. So that's like an interesting thing. What if he just like completely went limp because he was afraid? I've had that fucking happen to me before. Like I've just been like so afraid that I'm like hurting somebody in the act. I'm like, oh, are you okay or whatever? And like, no, keep fucking doing that, idiot. And then it's too late. Your mind is like flipped over to I'm worried about you or whatever. And then you're gonna be waiting like 5 minutes before that wears off. But uh, I don't. He reached up to stroke her breast while she got used to the feeling of having him inside of her. Uh, she wanted Dan to grip harder, and his hands tightened in response. A gasp caught in her throat. Freya began to move. The stinging feeling was starting to pass, and she could feel the slick warmth of being enveloped. I knew it wouldn't be long, thank God. They were breathing together, inhaling as Freya slid down. And exhaling as she rose up. Everything became amplified. Their vision had grown sharper. Their noses were flooded with the smell of the other. Every sigh and moan rang out, and every touch shouted between them. They were contracting as the world around them was expanding away from them. They shut their eyes and focused only on the sensation, and they could not feel where Dan ended and where Freya began. So that's not good. In fact, a lot of this is not good. This is probably going to need another pass. God. Oh, I really don't want to. Everything had become amplified. Their vision had grown sharper. Their noses were flooded with the smell of the other. Their noses were flooded with the smell of sex. Every sigh and moan rang out, and every touch shouted between them. They shut their eyes and focused only on the sensation. Neither could feel where Dan ended or where Freya began, only that they were drawing closer, moving towards somewhere they had never been before. They made love wrapped in that warm void, and when they were nearly there, she opened her eyes and looked down at his face. She was the sky over his ocean. He was a riverbed. They were one. She could feel Dan let go, and he was pouring inside of her. Dan let go and exploded in hot pulses of deliverance. As she felt him come, it set Freya off. Her orgasm swallowed his like a storm drawn into a hurricane. It was as if her whole body was being transmuted to light. Oh, that's too much. For an instant, their bodies were transmuted to ascendant light. The aftershocks continued for a long time, and when they could think again, it was to marvel that they hadn't died. They were stung by the feeling they'd brushed against something finite beings could not withstand, that if they'd lasted a moment longer, the petite mort would have become grand. Freya was collapsed on top of Dan. He was still inside of her, and she never wanted him to leave. The unity faded as he softened and slipped out of her. So it looks like this is about as painful for you as tearing a hymen. I don't know. I've never had a hymen which was torn. So I don't know how painful that is. But yeah, it's pretty fucking awkward and terrible, honestly. Like both because like I don't think this is the best written scene in the book. And it's like just especially hard to edit this on stream. But we shall persist. They were alone again in their own heads. Freya tried to keep a strong face, and she could see Dan was doing the same. But when he began to cry, she couldn't help but join him. Soon they were clinging to each other and weeping for what they had lost. I'm sorry, they told each other, almost in unison, but not quite. Freya shut off the light, And the harder she tried to hold on to him, the farther it seemed they drifted apart. No dreams. No dreams, Freya silently beseeched the starball. Jesus. You know the worst part about that? We got to do it again. That's not a good chapter. We can't stop there. So where did that end, and where did this begin? All right, so I'm okay-ish. Like now that I've got some distance from it, I'm more okay with the scene before. The like blending of dreams, I think, is a cool concept. I think it's worthwhile. But we have to run through this whole thing again because there's just so many points where it's just too fucking much. You know what I'm saying? And oh yeah, I think it needs an overhaul. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad. Oh, fucking hair going every which way. All right. Well, let me. The fuck was that sound? No, it's next door. Okay. All right. Well, let's take like five. We'll try to get some sense of this horse shit, and then we're gonna go through this chapter again because I'm not satisfied with it. faithful guard dog, keeping watch over the stream. Thank you, doggo. Thank you so much. All right. So we've taken a little time. So Rondito just linked that a 10-year-old boy with a colostomy bag just killed himself because he was getting bullied over a colostomy bag, which is a rough one right there. I can definitely, yeah, I can imagine some 10-year-olds fucking bullying somebody over a sea bag. And yeah, it really has me like wondering, like when I can't remember like the earliest like suicidal ideation I ever had, but it would have probably been somewhere around that like 10 to 12 mark, somewhere around there. But yeah, I can't remember ever making like definite plans. I guess like a big part was that there were not guns around when I was growing up. So yeah, like it would have been relatively difficult. I couldn't ever see like throwing myself from like a high place. And if you've ever tried to intentionally drown yourself, it's like fucking impossible, man. You can't do it. You like, and I'm a decent swimmer, so it was just not like really an option. Um, and like very seldom will there be like a lot of appeal for the idea of like jumping into traffic or whatever. So really, just the problem with suicide is just so very little of it is like appealing on a base level. You know, I'm sure if I just had like access to like a bunch of explosives where I could just blow myself to bits at a moment's notice, I wouldn't be here. Um, but yeah, I do not have a bomb vest on hand, nor do I think I would use one if I had one. So just something to think about right there. So Stratum says that I cannot own a gun. Ooh. For political reasons, or have you been convicted or something? Or did you do, well, yeah, I guess you did enough time in therapy that I would assume that that's like the specification. Or is that, are you just saying that, like, that's not like you're not permitted to own a gun? It's just you understand and recognize that, like, having a gun close at hand would be your undoing, which is something that I say to a lot of people. Like, we were talking about Tulpa on the stream, where he's like currently undergoing significant medication for depression, and he has a gun at his house for himself. And just that guy should not have a fucking gun, you know. Especially somebody like he's got a wife. I'd celebrate the day of blasting. Yeah, yeah, I hear you. You know. Yeah, usually, yeah, I don't suffer from real severe depression, and usually it's just like I need vitamin D or something like that. Um, but yeah, I've never felt like really in significant danger for myself. So, um, like I'm somebody who I can have guns around, and I'm not super worried about it there. Uh, and most of the time, like if I were to want to do that, like usually I'd probably like ride my motorcycle somewhere way the fuck in the north and just spend like a couple weeks in the wilderness and refine my will to live. I've talked about it on the show before. There were definitely like long periods where I was going through that long ass breakup and another breakup after that, where I was just talking about how sometimes you need a threat to your life to value it, right? Like you need to include yourself in some kind of existential risk to get to the point where you're like, glad I'm not fucking dead. And motorcycles are great at that, since like every time you ride a motorcycle, there's a pretty decent chance that you're going to kill yourself. Um, I guess guns are something like that. Some people like to like climb rocks, which is great at that. Um, just I don't know. There's definitely we were built for more. We were built to take on like a little bit more hardship than I believe that most of us get in our lives, and I feel like our bodies are constantly like trying to fill that in because we expected like have like a little bit more adrenaline to like life was supposed to be a little bit harder than this. I think all of us recognize, and our brains are like sort of um, scrambling to fill in the gaps, with all these like worries and so forth that aren't really even relevant to our survival. It just, I've always thought that people were meant to have a certain degree of suffering in their lives, and if they don't have it, they'll create it. But what do we have here? Your killing, you judges, shall be pity and not revenge, and as you kill, be sure that you yourselves affirm life. Damn, what's that from? That's some real gentlemen you can't fight in here. This is the war room type shit. All right, well, let's try and go through this again. And we're just looking for, let's do a pass just on the language here and try to fixate a little bit on not until we're united, Freya had thought. They were united now. Oh yeah, I took a stab at the Sprig Zarathustra or whatever there, but just like that first chapter where he's like coming down from the mountain. I have seen the high and mighty and so forth. He just kind of lost me there. I was just like, I am not resonating with this narrator at all. All right, what do we have here? They were united now. They'd gone to bed in their underwear, and she could feel Dan pressed against her through his boxers. Freya shifted against him, shuddering at the way he felt until she couldn't stand it any longer. She twisted around, throwing off the covers and climbing on top of Ban. She twisted around, throwing off the covers and climbing on top of Dan. Through his eyes, she looked dark and terrible in the flickering light of the fireplace. The echoes of her voice rang up in him. Echoes of their shared dream rang in him. I will destroy you. The thought stung. Freya leaned over and turned on the bedside lamp. They both winced at the light, but she needed Dan to see her. Not you, she pleaded. She desperately needed... Freya desperately needed Dan to believe the lie, to pretend with her. Dan was willing. Together they harnessed their minds, allowing only positive thoughts. Freya shut her eyes to see through his alone. She watched herself pull off her t-shirt, feeling him throb as his eyes ran up her stomach and over her breasts, along the line of her neck. It almost felt like a caress. That's one sentence. Sensing her thought, Dan followed the same line with his fingertips, agonizingly slow. Unconsciously, Freya pulled back from the intense feeling. As she drew away, Dan could feel her hair spilling off her shoulders and brushing down her back. The sensation made his fingers tremble. Opening her eyes again, Freya smiled and lowered herself so that she was pressing against Dan through their underwear. She was already wet, and he was rolling in the feeling, squirming on the bed beneath her. A twist of worry ran through Dan. He was so close already. Freya chased along that thread, savoring it, and when he was just a moment away, she lifted herself off of him. She lifted herself off. Writhing on the bed beneath her. She let him squirm until the danger had passed. Then she hooked her index fingers under the band of his boxers and pulled them off. Mm-hmm. Dan felt self-conscious, but Freya ran her eyes over every inch of his body with adoration. She wanted it all, the tight muscles at his neck, the curls of pubic hair, the straining erection, the thick slabs of his thighs. He was so right. As Dan became more aroused, his thoughts were beginning. As Dan became more aroused, his thoughts were shifting into direct animal pulses of want that pulled Freya forward with him. As Dan became more aroused, his thoughts were shifting into direct animal pulses of want that pulled Freya closer. Dan drew a deep breath through his nose. The smell of her arousal made his hair stand on end. Mm. Pounding behind his ears was a hot insistence that he could just rise up, pull her down against the bed, and take her. Freya melted towards the thought, but Dan did not act. He was too afraid of it. I was too afraid. This time, she would lead. With Dan's eyes locked on her, Freya slipped off her underwear, and the sight of her naked ran through Dan like an electric shock. She knew he would do anything she wanted him to, and she reveled in the power of it. She thought about straddling his face and riding until she nearly smothered him, white gasping stars exploding behind his eyes. The thought surged in Dan so hard it nearly made him come. Freya watched his penis twitch. Freya watched his penis twitch. They both wanted that very much, but it was something for later. For now, she needed him. They were both naked now. They were both naked. Freya climbed back on top of Dan and kissed him. Her tongue danced against his as her breasts brushed against his chest. Dan's hips were elevating towards her on pure instinct. He wanted her so badly, but he was also worried. What do we have here? So light behind the eyes was used in another instance this morning, describing being hit. Yeah, we did. We used that. So this is stars exploding behind his eyes. Yeah, we talk a lot about. In this book, there are probably like 10 or so different instances of flashes behind people's eyes. And yeah, there's I don't know, like if you shut your eyes and just think about it, there's like a whole spectrum of sort of ghosts, like after images flowing through your mind, and or just like just still like the whatever the rods or cones or what they're still reporting some of what's happening, and it takes a while to fade. Which is okay. I do think you're probably right that it's a little overused, but let's stay in the mode here because I think we're actually making good progress here, and I don't want to slip out of the groove of it. Dan's hips were elevating towards her on pure instinct. He wanted her so badly, but he was also worried. He wanted her badly, but he was also worried. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, this is a rough paragraph. His hips were elevating towards her on pure instinct. He wanted her badly, but he was also worried. Dan was afraid he'd come the moment Freya touched him, and Freya... They wanted each other very badly, but they were also worried. Dan was afraid he'd come the moment she touched him. Freya was afraid it would hurt. They were both orbiting the idea, and desire was slowly pulling them in. They were orbiting the idea as their desire drew them in. As slowly as her muscles could stand, Freya lowered herself. At last, she pressed her lips against him in a gentle kiss that set his eyes fluttering back. Her head rolled on her neck, caught in a feeling. Well, that's improved for these 3 pages so far. So welcome, Melpomenix. What editor are you using? This editor right here. This very, very inadequate editor right here. Now this is so this is written in Pages right here. I mostly just work in Pages when I'm writing. I like the iCloud integration, and Pages is like a little less cluttered and shitty than Microsoft Word. I've used a few other word processors that are like meant to be distraction free and this, that, and the other thing. But ultimately, I've just found that over time, Pages is fine. Um, yeah, like if Sublime Text, what I would really like is something where I could edit in white on black, which Pages just does not provide that option as of the last time I looked into it, which is probably 6 months ago. I would much prefer to be writing in white on black. All right, hold on just a second. I have been highlighted. No, everybody got highlighted by some idiot blogging about Freemasons. Um, so yeah, anyhow, for now I use Pages. Um, if I felt confident in some of the auto backup of Sublime Text, I would use it. But so far, like I tested that out, and I just didn't find it to be adequate um, at the time. And yeah, apologies that we're. I swear to God, this is probably one of the last 3 or 4 sex scenes in the book. The book is like 800 pages. Maybe about 20 of those are sex scenes total. But yeah, it's like you're playing Grand Theft Auto, and like the cut scenes, like when a relative or something like that walks by, they're always the girls with the titties, and the rest of the time it's you fucking trekking out your Jeep or whatever nonsense you're doing there. That's the sum of it, really. Okay. I was glad that it's early in the morning, so not that many people are watching. Freya reached down and took a. Let's see. Let's read through this paragraph again. Freya lowered herself towards Dan as slowly as her muscles could stand, giving him time to hold back. She was so close she could feel his hair tickling her and heat rising from him. She shut her eyes, basking in the feeling. She shut her eyes, basking in the feeling. Uh, At last, she pressed her lips against him in a gentle kiss that set Dan's eyes fluttering upward and Fred's head rolling on her neck. The point of contact between them was like an arc of electric blue light. For several beats, neither of them dared to move. Slowly, she began to slide against him, listening to the catch in his breath, the little sounds that he could not restrain. Freya reached down and took a hold of Dan. He was harder than she'd ever felt him before, slick with her wetness. She pressed him against her. They were so close. She only had to let go, slide down, and he would slip inside. He was watching her, staring at the place where they met. Da-da-da. Dan looked up and their eyes met. Freya slid down and he pierced her. Together they felt the tear. They shut their eyes against the pain. It hurt more than they had expected. Dan began to soften from concern. "I can take it," Freya insisted, tightening her grip on Dan's shoulders. He reached up to stroke her breasts while she got used to the feeling of having him inside of her. Freya wanted Dan to grip harder to distract her, and his eyes tightened in response. A gasp caught in her throat. She began to move, the stinging feeling. Look. She could feel both sides, the slick, enveloping warmth. The filling, expansive heat. They knew it wouldn't be long. They were breathing together. Yeah, let's take that out. Everything had become amplified. Their vision had grown sharper. Their noses were flooded with the smell of sex. Every sigh and moan rang out, and every touch shouted between them. They shut their eyes and focused only on the sensation. Neither could feel where Dan ended and where Freya began, only that they were drawing closer, moving together towards somewhere they had never been before. They made love wrapped in that warm void, and when they were nearly there, she opened her eyes and looked at his face. She was the sky over his ocean. He was her riverbed. They were one. Dan lost control and exploded in hot pulses of deliverance. As she felt him come, it set Freya off. Feeling Dan come set Freya off. Her orgasm swallowed his like a storm drawn into a hurricane. All right, so neither could feel where Dan ended and where Freya began, only that they were drawing closer, moving towards somewhere they had never been before. They made love, and when they were nearly... They shut their eyes and focused only on the sensation of making love. Da da da. When they were nearly there, Freya opened her eyes and looked down at Dan's face. She was the sky over his ocean. He was a riverbed. They were one. Dan lost control and exploded in hot pulses of deliverance. Feeling Dan come set her off. Yeah. That doesn't work. The feeling set Freya off. Her orgasm swallowed his like a storm drawn into a hurricane. They soared higher and higher, their bodies transmuted into ascendant, unbearable light. Much improved. Much improved. Yeah, like significantly better after that pass. The aftershocks continued for a long time, and when they could think again, it was to marvel that they hadn't died. They felt as if they had brushed against something finite beings could not withstand, that if they lasted a moment longer, the petite mort would have become grand. Freya was collapsed on top of Dan. He was still inside of her, and she never wanted him to leave. The unity faded as he softened and slipped out of her. Their last shared thought was worrying about the mess they'd made. They were alone again in their own heads. Freya tried to keep a strong face, and she could see Dan was doing the same. But when he began to cry, she couldn't help but join him. Soon they were clinging to each other and weeping for what they had lost. I'm sorry, they told each other, almost in unison, but not quite. Freya shut off the light, and the harder she tried to hold on to him, the further it seemed they drifted apart. It's farther, not further. The farther it seemed they drifted apart. Wait, is it farther or further there? I don't know the rule there. That as an adverb, farther and further are used indiscriminately when literal or figurative distance is involved. Farther refers to physical distance and further to figurative distances. Well, then further is right. Oh, I like that. Physical versus figurative. That's a neat point of comparison. No dreams, Freya silently beseeched the starball. Well, goddamn. That was a wrenching fucking bit of a chapter right there. So I'll still say that special attention to this and the next chapter. So yeah, chapter 79 and 80 will be ones that like will especially need the attention of a professional editor because uh, they're really it really comes across as like trying too hard for the most part. There's not like a flow of language that we would like to have there. And some of it is just, me trying to write. I think I'm uh, swinging a little bit above my fucking weight class or whatever sports metaphor fits in there. But, ooh. Oh, yeah, we can delete that note because we definitely 81. Okay, so now we're just 2 pages away from our goal of editing 10 pages a day, which is I'm thrilled about. So that brings us to chapter 81. So by the way, like in terms of our original, we would now be 80% of the way done. But in fact, we know that that's not the case. We're much closer to 75% of the way done. Oh, because there used to be 100 chapters in this book, and now I think it's like 105 because of some little splits and stuff that we've done there. Yeah, so chapter 80 is just fucking 81, 82, 83, 84. It's a short one. What do we feel like? What's our time? 7:38. Da, 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 da. Well, I tell you what. Let's take a stab at this for a little bit. No dreams. When they woke, Freya and Dan made love again, trying to touch something of what they'd shared last night. She was still tender, but it wasn't too painful, and they were both eager to experiment. After a long and sweaty jumble of configurations, they were sore and neither could finish. As Dan was pulling out, he saw something on her face and winced as if he'd been struck. She'd tried to mask her disappointment, but she had failed. I'm sorry, Dan apologized. He laid down on his side. He lied down on his side, facing away from her, exhaling through his nose like he'd been punctured. Don't be sorry. Don't be sorry, Freya insisted. It's not you. You're doing everything right, and I love the way you feel. She spoke rapidly, and her words had no impact. She hugged him from behind, ridiculously small as the big spoon. I mean that. You feel it when we get back. Or when we're back. When we're back. She hung on the words, probing at them in her mind. Somewhere, the unity had become normal, and separation had become unnatural, something to suffer through. Dan wriggled out of her grasp to sit up against the headboard. I feel so shattered, Dan said. She let the useless urge to reassure him slip by, and they stared into each other's eyes, groping for echoes of being one. Together their eyes drifted to the starball on the nightstand. I think we already got into this. It's weird the way I'm aware of the starball all the time, Dan said. It's like my little toe. I don't feel it, but I'm aware it's there. Freya couldn't help but wiggle her toes after he said it, and he was doing the same. They caught each other's eyes and began to giggle. They'd been so serious. Dan grinned and slipped down and started tickling her. She yelped and thrashed, almost kicking him. Stop, she cried, and he took her foot and set the instep against his cheek. Then he was kissing her heel, her ankles, along the bridge of her foot. What the fuck? He kissed her toes, and then he slipped his big toe in her mouth and began to suck on it. He was unexpected, and the sense that they were just playing around slipped away. Freya shut her eyes. The feeling was at once weird and intimate. Don't worry. Oh, if only Effie could see us now. Is that his thing? Is it mine? She felt herself getting hot. He was kissing his way up her calf, up to the inside of her thigh, and she started to tremble. Can I? Dan asked. Please. Before this, she'd felt his reluctance to go down on her, the lining of fear that he wouldn't like it. He was enthusiastic now, so much so that she grabbed his hair and pulled him back so that his tongue was barely touching her. Softer, as light as you can, and move up a little, she ordered. His eyes fluttered up and his cheeks were flushed. He liked it when she told him what to do. She could feel herself ramping up in response. She took his head in both hands and pulled his mouth tighter against her, riding the edge between pleasure and intensity and pleasure. It took a long time to get her there. His tongue must have been ready to fall off, but he kept going. Dan kept going. He was a runner and didn't mind if something hurt. Dan's breathing was getting more intense. He was grinding himself back and forth against the bed while he kissed her. She loved to watch him, his eyes shut as if in prayer, the slow, steady movement of his face between her thighs. Finally, she couldn't keep her eyes open any longer. She was arching her back, pulling him closer. Her eyes shut open as she came. Everything was razor sharp for an instant before it rolled away into white. He kept going as she was phasing back into the world, and Freya had to push him away. He looked a little stunned. Are you okay? So good. I just get sensitive right after. Oh my God, that felt amazing. He joined her with a proud little grin, and when he moved to kiss her, she had a moment of hesitation, but she went with it. She didn't know she'd be grossed out by her own taste, but it was nothing. I want to know what that feels like, as you, he said, with a bashful glance away. Anytime you want, she said. Against her side, she could feel him twitching with excitement, and she slipped her hand down to feel him. He was so hard. She grinned and slid down to return the favor. Slush and salt hissed under the wheels as they wove through the hills. The Toyota crept past trees laden with snow. Melt dripped from them in a diamond rain. They were nearly home. Freya had worried so much over nothing. It was so simple to be with Dan, so easy to talk with him or to do anything at all, unified or severed. She could have been happily locked in a prison cell as long as he was at her side. In the lulls of their conversation, she had time and distance to consider everything. I think that point was make. I think this point was made earlier in the story, if so, shortened so it's not belabored. In the lulls of their conversation, she had time and distance to consider everything. She ran through all of her problems, flunking math, the insane threats from Malcolm Lewis, Lassa's unraveling. They were all serious issues. The authorities investigating, they were all serious issues. But from this vantage, she could see they were only side quests. Dan was the main line, the only one who really mattered, and now she was certain. She knew him better than anyone else ever had or ever would, and she loved him. Even without the unity, she could feel him on her skin, inside of her even after the shower. He came inside of me. She hadn't expected it to feel so important, but the significance echoed in her, a note of shining pride. She felt a stab of worry. What if the pill didn't work? What if she got pregnant? It was no longer the looming doomsday in her mind it had once seemed. Her thoughts darted ahead, dancing over the possibility. Of course it wouldn't happen. She hadn't missed a pill, but what if? The thought dug into her like a barb, and she knew she hadn't felt this way before. Even before she met Dan, even before Randall died, she knew she would get rid of it if something happened. This is a really important turn of phrase right here, where she says she knew she would get rid of it. It, not like a baby, which is... She would have gone to Lhasa, and 2 minutes later they would have been in the Mercedes, headed for the clinic. No discussion needed. Freya reached into her pocket for the star ball. It was warm to the touch. That, as usual, doesn't need to be there. Was this what she thought, or what the star ball wanted her to think? She probed at the idea. She probed, looking for the cool feeling in her skull of the star ball pacifying her. She wondered if Dan would be able to feel a difference in her. For the 1000th time today, she wished for unity. There was every chance it was working on him in the same way. What do you want? Freya wondered, and she wasn't sure if she was asking the star ball or herself. She was aware she would have to answer for this when the unity returned. It was crazy. They were too young. They had to go to college, get jobs, get married, all of that. But right now, all she wanted was to ask Dan to pull off the road somewhere secluded. But right now, all she wanted was to ask Dan to pull off the road somewhere secluded so she could climb on top of him and have him inside her again. They were made for this. All else was distraction. Again, she ran her fingers over the orb, wondering what was her and what was it. Maybe this was just what would happen when you were in love, something that would pass when the shine wore off. So, at last they were on Willow Road, and her heart began to beat faster. Freya was going to invite him inside. They could order pizza, snuggle on the couch. Freya was going to invite Dan inside. They could order pizza and snuggle on the couch. She was going to make love to him in her bed so that she could always feel he'd been there. She hoped he would spend the night, even though she knew he couldn't. Unity would return. Everything would be all right. But none of those things would happen. Lassa's car was parked in the driveway. Cool. So, yeah, that's not too bad of a chapter. I like what she's considering. I like the thoughts that are cropping up there. So pretty happy with chapter 81 right there. It's like relatively brief, but in those pages we touch on some important points. She's coming to a decision, and good. Okay, that's 82. And all right, we're going to stop there for the day. I think that's about all that I've got going in me. But yeah, thank you to everybody who plowed through that horse shit with me. God. I mean, keep in mind, like, we're really making a big deal out of these sex scenes just because like, it's uncomfortable to talk about sex with an audience of random strangers where you don't know who the fuck is listening. And in some ways, I think that's a good thing because it really it a little bit gates some of like the more crazy extravagances of this. Is one of the reasons why I've been so stoked about doing this live editing on stream. I really feel like it does a lot to improve the quality of trying to appeal to a lot of readers. Um, and I had worried that we would be like losing some of the specialness, like the extremeness or whatever. But in most cases, I think that this is better. So let me see. Well, that's that. Okay, well, we did a decent job today. Long editing session. I think this is like 3.5 hours or so. We began at like 4:30, and it's now 7:52. So yeah, we're making progress. Page 623 of 801, just like 180 pages to go. I don't know if you guys can feel it getting closer, but holy God, I'm pretty ready to be done with this edit. But I know that our hardest work is still yet to come. Like definitely that last 2 chapters was something that I was like really dreading going through on stream. And now that I've gone through it, I feel I had a good reason to dread going through it on stream. That was so painful. But here we are. So yeah, shout out to everybody. I wish you good luck in your efforts today. My girlfriend is just getting back from a trip, so I'm excited to see her this evening. Not sure what we're gonna go for dinner, but yeah, I'm gonna have a good time. And I would estimate that we'll do like a little shorter session tomorrow because I'm gonna be tired as fuck. And also, this is too long to edit, really. But yeah, happy with how this goes. So today I'm going to post chapters up to 81 on the blog, and yeah, we'll that's enough for any one man. Penis pump, and thank you all for tuning in.